If you were going to go back to your early self and you could give him any message right now, you could say anything you want him to know, what would you share?
Just don't take things so seriously.
I think I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
Man, that is a tough one.
What's the value in repeating a mistake somebody else has already made and who can tell you how to avoid it?
I think I'd be where I'm at today, probably 10 years earlier, if I'd have played with a bit more reckless abandon.
Well, I could use a lot of help when I was younger later. I wish I could say there was just one thing.
I think I would tell myself to trust my gut sooner.
That's a really great question. I'm going to go back to my faith.
To be confident in your skin.
Oh, man, we don't have enough time, Marc. We got to open a bottle of wine and settle in. We could have a long conversation.
If you could go back to the younger self when you're there, what piece of advice would you say, hey, this is what I would do?
So this is definitely a question I've had before, and I think I would tell myself to trust my gut sooner. I think there was easily the first 5 years where I would feel it and then go against it, and it would always be right. In reflection, it would always be right. But I didn't think that I had the experience or, had been doing it long enough, or, I was dealing with people twice my age potentially, and I literally would get asked, "Are you, the local high school? Are you in CF High?" And I would jokingly say, "I'm a sophomore," just to mess with them back. But so I think I didn't have that confidence, and so I think trusting yourself, trusting your gut, I love the saying, "Why not us? Why not now?" Or not, and that's very true. Like, we didn't believe in ourselves for those first couple of years because we didn't know if we could or should or would, and then we did, and you get a little more confidence, and all of a sudden there's this. It goes off and you're like, things are changing. People are hearing us. They're listening, and we have a little more clout. And so I would just trust my gut sooner.
If you came back, 2005, you step into the president's role, what would you tell that younger version of yourself? What piece of leadership advice, life advice would you give her?
Yeah, get your network earlier, ask for help earlier, right? It's hard to learn to do it and it's uncomfortable to do it. But once you start, it gets easier. And what's the value in repeating a mistake somebody else has already made and who can tell you how to avoid it, right? Or solutions to avoid it. And you just solve that problem quicker. So there's a great quote, a master carpenter, it doesn't make any less mistakes than a novice carpenter. They just know how to fix them faster. So go to the masters and ask them for help, because they know how to fix your problems faster than you do.
What would you go back and tell your younger self as a leader?
I would tell myself, my younger self, to be confident in your skin. And I think that's so important because I had so much baggage, so much stuff inside me. And I had so much baggage, so much stuff outside me, meaning the world stuff. The world can be pretty judgmental. The world can be pretty harsh to leaders who are non-traditional for what it is they are doing, when it is they are doing it, whether they are young or they happen to be different. So I would just tell myself to be confident and to be comfortable in your skin. And if you are in a room, to occupy your space. Don't play small for anybody's comfort. That's what I would tell myself.
If you were going to go back to your early self, you've got the young John's coming out of school, he's getting into leadership. And you could give him any message right now. You could say anything you want him to know, any leadership lesson, anything that you say, hey, listen, this is what you need to know going into this leadership ranks. What would you share with that younger self?
Man, that is a tough one. I think for me, I struggled a lot with understanding that my self-worth was not connected to my achievement. And so I would say, you're worth it the way you are. Now go out and don't be afraid to fail. Take some risks and go for it. Regrets happen because of things you didn't try. I don't yet regret anything I've tried and failed.
If you could go back to the day you stepped into 30 years ago, you start in your business, you step into the role and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? What would you tell that younger version of Lisa?
That's a really great question. I'm going to go back to my faith, and I've been a Jesus follower since I was 13 years old, but let's just say there's been times where I've really tried to lead without including him. And I would go back and say, keep your anchor there. Just focus on being a faithful follower of him, and then everything else will fall into place. And I'm talking about, Marc, I'm talking about from being a business leader to being a spouse to being a parent. It really affects every area of my life, but I've not always done it perfectly. But I've come to the point in my life, I think it's age a lot, and God's had to show me things in multiple lessons over the years, right? But I'm really truly just trying to surrender to him, keep him as my anchor, and just stay focused on that instead of all the other things. So there's so much more we could talk about there. But
when you go back there, you think about yourself in 2003. What would have 20 plus years past that? What would you tell yourself? What piece of advice would you give yourself back then?
Oh man, we don't have enough time, Marc. We got to open a bottle of wine and settle in. We could have a long conversation with full humility. So Michelman is a family business. We are celebrating our 75th anniversary this year, and I represent third generation. But I came into this business the old-fashioned way. I married into the family, not the business. So I married into the family and joined the business 8 years later. Some people marry into the business. I had no interest in the business. Life changes, and here I found myself. Michelman did not need me to be successful. It had been a very successful business well before I stepped into the role of CEO. And at the same time, I realized how much potential could be unlocked in this business. We became, over my tenure, a much more global business, and we grew with our science and capabilities and, I think, impact. I raise that now because I tried too hard early, I think, to basically ignore the fact that we were family, and I was focusing on just professionalizing the business. I never would deny that we were a family business, by the way, but it just wasn't that important to me. I came to realize, though, over a long period of time, that these were not mutually exclusive. One can have a very powerful family or private business and still be incredibly professional. And in fact, the fact that we are family, the fact that we are generational or evergreen, the fact that our values are what lead us, the fact that we're planning for the next 75 years is why people want to come work for us and why businesses want to do business with us. Because we're also a highly professional and very capable business, right? And so we had people who would leave GE or Exxon or Procter & Gamble to come join Michelman. We pay them quite well, and they had quite a great career, and they knew that they'd be valued as human beings. They knew that they were part of something bigger. They knew they were part of, hopefully, a generational story, right? So it took me a while to grow up, let my ego get out of the way, because I was the son-in-law and I was going to prove that I deserved the job, and so I had to get past all that and then grow up and realize that I didn't have to prove to anybody that I was the leader. I had the job. All I had to do was just do the job, right? Rather than try to convince people that it was mine, that I didn't get it because I was the son-in-law. It was crazy. Of course I got the job because I was the son-in-law. It didn't make me not capable. And so I had to get past all of that. And then also, I had great coaches along the way, which I know you have as well. That's one of the reasons why I love to coach now, is because I was blessed to have great coaches.
If you could go back there and tell your younger self some advice. So you're now the coach, you're the mentor, you're the guide for yourself. What would you share with them? What advice would you give to that younger leader of yours?
My greatest motivator is also my greatest inability to move quick. And I admire some people like my dad is pretty much a gunslinger. Some other people in this industry are gunslingers. Bob Clark. I'm a little bit of a plotter. Only recently have I started, and because of some things I saw, I tended to be a bit more risk averse. So I think I would say to myself is, I think I'd be where I'm at today probably 10 years earlier if I'd have played with a bit more reckless abandon and trusted my gut and my instinct. And the other thing is the engineer in me liked managing the numbers and focused on that. And the transition, gray hair and oldness teaches you, really that's the wrong focus, and it took me a while to learn that and get it focused and where I think we are today, which was our whole mission is to develop leaders and empower leaders and let them achieve their visions. And I'm a facilitator of that versus very much a command and control and all that good stuff, because that's not sustainable long term.
If you were going to tell that Todd, your version of Todd right there, if you're going to give him one piece of advice, because we got a lot of young leaders, what advice would you give him?
I want to say this in an honest scale way. So we're not the largest, fastest growing company in the country, or, you're not interviewing the number one financial advisor in the United States. You're interviewing Todd Brand. And so I want to tell you what I think the answer to that question is, acknowledging I think I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and it is so far ahead of where I ever thought I would be that if I would go back to that day, I did a spreadsheet. So, right, my mom and dad retire. I'm sitting there now. I know how much money I owe them every month they're still alive. So 24 years later, I know how much I owe to make this thing work. And first I have to pay them before I pay me. And sitting there in my spreadsheet, which somewhere around this office, it still exists because I saw it like 5 or 6 years ago. But I graphed what I thought the business could do that would allow me to just provide for my family and not let my mom and dad starve to death because I couldn't pay the note. And I know I don't mean to personalize it that much, but that's really what it looked like. And I graphed all that out, and I took each little cell and I said, now that plus X percent plus X percent. And in hindsight, like, we blew by that graph so materially, but it didn't feel like it. And the thing I didn't understand was kind of hyperbolic, or the nature of compound interest, which I deal in. I never really saw the business compounding the way it actually did. I was more of a linear thinker. Just get me to the next year. I think if I can get here, then that would feel pretty good. Maybe I could get a new car for my wife, or, I was thinking really granular and really linear and really short. And the piece of that I would tell myself is, you have no idea. I mean, I won't tell you today's story, but Marc, I'd say, and I think the same is true for you, my friend. I know you, I know this is how you're wired, but there are days I think, best day ever. And today is one of those days, best day ever. It couldn't be better than right now. And the piece that I would have told myself is, aim at that. Don't aim at your little numbers doing the little number thing. Aim at, go have an amazing day. Just have it. Do whatever it takes where you pour yourself out and you're done with that day. And it will take you so much better than if you just plot little numbers in front of you. And that's the thing I would have told myself is just, it's not like when you say, it's not good to be alone. It's not me, right? So God, you can use me. If I let you can use me. And it takes me to a whole different level of satisfaction with what I've done. I'm 56 years old. And I would tell you now what I hope you would tell yourself. I would tell you 2024, better than 23, which was better than 22, which was better than 21, which was better than all the way back. And that is a function of just trying to put a day in and go, this is going to be a spectacular day. It might not get all wins, but it's going to be a day where I go, you know what? That's what I had to offer. And I gave it. And teaching other young people like what it really looks like, lay yourself down. Just lay yourself down. That doesn't mean work 80 hours a week as a slave so I can have a new car. That just means come in, give your all, and go home. And it organizationally has taken us to a place that I didn't think I would ever be.
Anything you want to leave this group with as far as what you would like them to know or what you would have liked somebody to tell you earlier in your career?
Yeah, I would just say, if I could go back to an earlier self, like, I don't know, as I'm in my 20s or early 30s, I'd be like, just don't take things so seriously. It's just like, we probably only go around once, right? We would probably only live once. And, we get caught up, we all get caught up in things that probably aren't the most important. And it's best just not to take things seriously. And people are attracted to people that are fun and not too serious, Yeah. And, even if it's like, oh, we lost a client or we didn't get this big deal or that deal or an important employee, who's going to a competitor or whatever. Yeah, it's upsetting, give yourself a little stress. And then just like in the grand scheme, it's fine. Go on with life. Yeah. So I think, I meet a lot of people that are super successful that are just like serious. I'm just like, that sounds no fun. You don't want to be this like super successful, stressed, no fun person, which by the way is what I was becoming when I was a lawyer. My wife helped me pull the ripcord. She's like, you have no personality anymore. You need like the practice of law is not for you, Jennings. I was like, okay.
Because there's a lot of young leaders that listen to this podcast. And so what would you share with that younger Susan?
Well, I could use a lot of help when I was a younger leader. I wish I could say there was just one thing, but, the piece that was, I think, most challenging for me is, I tend to run pretty hard. I really have a high sense of drive and ambition. And as a leader, what I realized is it was really important for me to instill that sense of energy and purpose and go as a team. I outran a lot of folks, but it really, I think, came from being more of an individual contributor mindset. I get it. I could go faster, but I'm not going to go farther by myself. I think there's an African proverb, right? You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And it really was probably one of the best lessons. I learned it the hard way, to be honest with you. I burned through people. I burned through some engines. I'm not proud of how I learned it at all. But it was a really good lesson in saying it's important that you build the team. And so in your desire to go fast, and there's nothing wrong with ambition and there's nothing wrong with high expectations. I'm not saying that. I'm saying as the leader, it's imperative that you bring your team along. And that means giving them the honest feedback. If it's not working or it's missing the mark, or it's honest feedback on what you believe they're capable of. But it's also about being insightful enough to know that your job is to develop them so that together you can go farther. Your job is not to do all the work. And so that I see as a big shift, because usually you've got high performers and ambitious folks who ascend to these leadership roles. And that is a massive shift in your thinking, because it's not about you anymore. It's about you in service to all of the people who are depending on you. And so that's a lot of responsibility, but that takes a lot of courage to be able to say, my job is to develop them. My job is not to do it for them. And so that would be, I wish I could have learned that better earlier.